Heather, thanks for meeting with me like this to just chat and talk a little bit about what God has been doing in your life through this time of self-isolation.
Yeah.
You've been laid off from the school where you were working, and so you're home with your boys, and obviously there's obviously a whole lot to do when you are home with them, but now you are afforded some time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a very different time in terms of how much time and space there is to be pressing into God, to be coming closer to his heart. This is a really unique opportunity for me and for, I think, quite a few others. I know there's a lot of people from our church that are still working, but there's probably quite a few others in a similar position to me, whether they're parents or whether they're at a different season of their life, but that are home when they wouldn't normally be home. And that's, especially for this extended period of time, quite unique, I would say, in the opportunity that it gives us. Yeah, so I of course have to homeschool the boys, so that takes up time, but I also love to use some of that time to help them also to come closer to the Lord and to do more searching of their own hearts and building of their own characters than maybe I would even normally get when we're at school all the time. So yeah.
And you understand the whole process of walking with Christ and being a disciple. Like you've even studied spiritual formation, and your master's degree is in that. So one of the big objections we always hear, right, from the people that we talk to as well, too busy to take time with God, right? Too busy. And now many people are in places, and even if they do work, some of them just, at night, you can't go out, you can't do what you want. How would you tackle some of those questions in people's life that are just too busy? How would you address something like that in someone's life?
Well, what I've found over time, at certain points in my journey of following the Lord, you have this kind of idea, which is not a wrong idea at all, but you see kind of as spending time with God as that devotional time, and that being the sole time, and that sort of it is the type of time spending with him that is very concentrated. So I can see why people might say, well, I don't have that half an hour or that hour or that 15 minutes even, or whatever, to just do that. But I think that as I've grown in my journey, I've been able to realize that he doesn't just want us during that concentrated half an hour time. He wants, like how it says in, I don't remember if it's Thessalonians, but it says to pray without ceasing, right? And I used to think, like, how in the world do we pray without ceasing? And I still don't have obviously a full understanding of what that means, but I do have a sort of a deeper understanding, I guess, of it being us constantly living in his presence every single moment. It's not just the time when we're just sitting there, but when we are taking that time to sit there and read the Bible, which is really important too, and do that specific prayer time, which is really important. But it's also just in every aspect of our lives, whatever we're doing, even if we're at work, if we're taking care of our children, anything, like to constantly in the back of our minds, and not just in the back of our minds, but even in the forefront of our minds, be realizing we are in the presence of God, and everything that we do in our lives can be worship to him. And that doesn't just have to be like us constantly being in that perfect state of contentment all the time either, because David in the Psalms and other psalm writers were pouring out their hearts when they're in total grief, like how we have our moments now, and I'm sure many times in our lives, but this current situation, how you were talking about that a couple of weeks ago, like how we have those times where we just feel overwhelmed with grief, and those, just as much as we're walking through our day, can be just as much times to be pouring that out to him, even as we're washing our dishes, or even as we're working in our gardens and doing those
Yeah.
extra hobby things that we don't normally get to do, like those are all opportunities for us to realize that we are in his presence and that he is with us constantly. It's almost like whoever you're self-isolating with, it's like that, like you have a extended period of time. Yeah, I have my extended period of time with my boys, and that's the way it is. If we can think about that, that's the way it's meant to be with God too. He's constantly with us, and there's no need to be separated from him, like in everything that we're doing and in all aspects of our lives, to share our hearts with him, and for him to share his heart with us in what we're doing.
I know one Sunday a few weeks ago, you wrote to Lydia and I, and you just said, "Hey, I just wrote this little song, and it came out of a quiet time." And I don't know if that had really a lot to do with my next question here, but you did write to Lydia and just talk to her about how you've been taking this time deliberately. Share a little bit about what God has been doing inside of you during this journey.
So I think, well, first of all, for specific things that I have been doing to come closer to the Lord, is I have this book that I'm going through called, I have it right here. I can just show you the cover if you want to. It's called A 10-Week Journey to the Heart of God. And basically, it's just this person, Claire Cloninger, she's leading us through aspects of coming closer into intimacy with Christ. And so then God, it's sort of like, it's called Dear Abba. So it's letters, because Abba is that special name that we can use for our Father, Daddy, like how it says in Romans. And it's him, she kind of writes from his heart to us out of scripture and that kind of thing. And then she gives us an opportunity to write from our hearts in regards to whatever it was that specific topic was about that she was bringing out that day. And it's basically every day you do that, and then you wait and you listen, kind of like in emotionally healthy spirituality, where we learned about taking those silent moments to just sit in God's presence, and God might say something to us in that. And so that's what she encourages every single time. Basically, read the letter that he writes to us, the love letter, then we write from our hearts to him, and then we sit and we listen and see if he has anything more to add into our lives. So that's what I've mostly been doing. And so it's just a matter of him growing in me that longing to be close to him, longing to know him deeply, to have a constant trust in him. This is a totally different time. I mean, I have other things going on in my family too, with my sister and my grandma, but both with cancer, and my sister's very, very advanced and not well off with it. She's okay in spirits and okay, physically to walk around, but it is a very, very serious situation, and we have no idea how that's going to play out, other than it doesn't sound great. And so even that type of situation right in the middle of this, I mean, I'm very careful, we're all very careful to keep her very safe, because we think that she would be more weak. And so even that in the middle of this is sort of a big deal, because we wait for information. That's difficult. So it's a matter of, even in something always throughout my life and throughout my family's life, provided for us. He's always taken us through on that journey faithfully. And so it's good that I can look back too and say, look at all these times when God has brought us. And he tells us that in the scriptures too, about how he says that to Israel a lot. He says, remember what I've done for you. Remember how I brought you out of Egypt, out of slavery. And so he's been reminding me of that, like of all these times, these tangible times throughout my life and my family's life. Say, look at how faithful I am to you. Look at how much you can trust me. You can sit with me in quietness and trust, and that's where your strength is. And so, that's
Wow.
the main
So
difference.
So you have compounded situations. You spoke briefly about how you're homeschooling your boys now, and but not only that, and the self isolation, but then your sister and your mom and you like just the whole dynamic here, or your grandmother. Sorry, the whole dynamic. There's layer upon layer.
Yes.
And really just drawing closer to God has been a blessing in a sense. So, Heather, just give us some encouragement. Encourage people who are really busy. In a few words, tell us the importance or why or how to just find time for God.
Okay. Well, it's sometimes when we are really busy, it feels like it's just another added to-do thing, an added burden almost, even though we wouldn't like to call it that, of course. But that's what it can feel like. But it's actually amazing when you take the time out of that time, or do what I said from the beginning part when we were talking about how we recognize his presence even in every single little busy thing that we're doing. But just it's amazing how much improved quality of life in your heart, in your spirit, even in your physical body, and everything that you do, the more you spend with God, the more energy and life he puts into us to give out into what we are doing. It's actually not a burden at all, even though it looks like that. But when God draws us, when his Holy Spirit's drawing us to come to him, he actually gives into us far more than we can ever ask or imagine. Like it says in Ephesians, we don't know until you start to really pour into that, to realize that's actually where he talks about himself as the living water and the life abundant. Well, he's telling us the truth. That is what he does. When we come to him, he pours himself into us, and then we have so much more to give out in our busy days that we have to go through. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And it's good to see you on Sundays with your boys running around there and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, say hi to them for us. And thank you, Heather. Be blessed. Have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Okay.
Okay.